dude, every time I watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I can only think, there's Lois, man. Just cast her.
The spunkiness, the sort of bullish, like, just I'm going to go after what I need to do, regardless of my own personal safety.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And any kind of common sense,
Yeah,
Common sense is not a Lois Lane thing. And common sense is not a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel thing. She just goes for it.
that's right.
Clear as a bell.
This gave me an opportunity because of the thing that you suggested we talk about this week.
Mm-hmm.
That was an excuse, the fact that you've been so busy, that I could actually go back and watch an entire season of a show that I've always loved, but hadn't seen the last season. And that show is The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
Yes.
And that will seem like a really weird shift for us. It's like, what are they doing talking about that show? But it's because of the big red S that's behind you.
Yep.
We're talking about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel simply because Rachel Brosnahan, the effervescent star, it was announced quite a while ago that she's our Lois Lane, our new Lois Lane. Rachel Brosnahan apparently fated to only play characters with alliterative names. Midge Maisel, Lois Lane.
Oh, yeah. I was trying to remember what her character's name was in House of Cards.
Oh, I have a feeling I've totally made this up. She'll have played 2 alliterative characters.
Right.
And the casting's just perfect. For one thing, you couldn't have a better setup part to play Lois Lane than a Midge Maisel. Someone who's hyper intelligent, fast talking, gorgeous, but all that stuff, it's like, yeah, the writing was on the wall. All the front runners I thought were fine. But I was sitting there going like, dude, every time I watch Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, I can only think, there's Lois, man. Just cast her.
You immediately see what James Gunn was thinking. And coming from somebody who, and by the way, people, if you haven't seen the show, we're going to be spoiling the bejesus out of the show.
Oh,
so
yeah. I mean,
watch all 5 seasons, come back. It won't take you long.
I'd love to actually see somewhere in the comments someone go, it's 2 weeks later. I have binged it.
But yeah, James Gunn, who was essentially around the same age as you and I, he's in his mid to late 50s, whatever. He grew up watching the same stuff that we did. So James Gunn, I'm sure, is absolutely very familiar with all the different iterations of Lois and the different actresses who have portrayed her. But I would think he would agree with us that we have been lacking, unfortunately. I think the last great Lois that we had was Margot Kidder. And there's been fine actresses portraying her, but there's a little bit of that special something. Well, actually, a lot of that special something has been kind of missing from her portrayal. Just the spunkiness, the sort of bullish, like, just I'm going to go after what I need to do, regardless of my own personal safety.
Yeah, that's a big thing.
And any kind of common sense, not common sense is not a Lois Lane thing, and common sense is not a Marvelous Mrs. Maisel thing. She just goes for it from the very first episode.
Well, the whole thing is, I mean, literally they bookend it, the beginning of her career and the thing that really launches her, which shows up in the very last episode. We finally see what really broke her for the world. Both of them are acts of what you're talking about, recklessness, where she's like, I'm about to do something that could go horribly wrong, but I believe in it. And of course you sit there going like, well, that's Lois Lane in a nutshell, which there was a Superman comic from the 50s in which Lois was trapped in a nutshell. And that, I remember that. The problem was it was a lead nutshell and Superman could not tell that she was inside of it.
Yeah, it's a classic.
No, I mean, absolutely. And when you said to, like, have you finished Maisel? And I was like, no, actually. And it was after season 5 had wrapped and I just didn't get around to watching it. So over the last week, what a delight, man, because I hadn't been in the Maisel world since season 4 and it was just great. And now I'm caught up. Luckily, it was never spoiled for me. Not that there's too much to spoil. The only thing is, if you'd watched it, you might be going, who does she end up with? Or how does she die? I mean, I didn't think they would go there, but I was like, I wonder what the tale is. I think they nailed it. You said you want to watch season 5 of Marvelous Mrs. Maisel about where it went wrong.
Well, you mentioned, we mentioned Mrs. Maisel a while back, and you said that I'm not so sure about the direction they went in the 5th season. You hadn't seen it yet. I think you were just basing that off of things people had told you.
I was probably basing it off of the way season 4 wrapped up, which of course it's a drama. It's a comedy drama, but the way season 4 wrapped, it was not dire, but you're like, oh, I don't like the place they're leaving Midge in.
Oh, okay.
You know, where she had slept with Lenny Bruce, and there was a whole, you know, her walking out into the blizzard and all that stuff, and then I was like, man, this is, I don't know about this. And then season 5, with all of its time jumps, the only thing I think about season 5 that is a little creaky is it's only 9 episodes.
Yeah,
I
something
think
like
it's
that.
like
8 or
9.
9. Yeah.
And not that that's bad. It's just that they clearly had so many ideas.
Yeah, and that is, I thought that's what you were, when I started watching season 5. I was like, oh, this must be what he's talking about, all the time jump,
Where,
which was
yeah,
not present in the previous 4 seasons at all.
exactly.
And it's, I thought to myself, I was like, this really seems like they found out, you know, that
Yes,
this was the
we're not
last
coming back
season, and they're
for
like,
this.
shit, we got to try to figure out how to cram like whatever it was, like 3 or 4 seasons into one season.
It's pretty chaotic.
So it is a little, and I wouldn't say they lost me, but I was a little like, a few times when they're into far future, I'm like, no, go back, because the part of the magic of the show was being ensconced in the early
period.
1960s, and all of a sudden you're in like 1970. You know, the 1970s was a little, that wasn't quite as off-putting because that's not too far after that.
Yeah, but when they're getting to the 80s and the 90s
And
and
even
all that,
2005, you know, towards the end, I'm like,
yeah,
no, this is like, I feel like I'm watching Regis Philbin now. It's just not, it doesn't really have the same magic anymore.
they're doing a lot of stuff where they or they did a lot of stuff where they were doing that just to, and they know that some people are hanging on what becomes of blah blah blah, you know, this character or this plot line. And so what they were doing, kind of craftily, because he's, you know, the Paladinos, they do good stuff, but the whole thing of, they know they're playing with you. So the very first episode, you get a flash forward where they're talking about her various marriages and stuff like that, which is kind of part of her act. So we were like, oh, so she didn't get back together with Bob, or if she did, it was not a lasting thing, and and then you realize over the course of season 5, what they're doing is trying to focus down and focus down and focus down on just Midge and Susie, that relationship. It's almost as if all the great loves, and you know, Joel gets a lot of his due, as is the original husband that she never really ever got over and still loves. That's really sweet, actually. But it was like the most important partnership wasn't the lovers, wasn't the kids, it was her manager. And so that's the way it ends. And I thought, nicely done, guys. If it weren't for terrible makeup,
Yeah.
you cannot do flash forwards with, especially a young, very attractive lady. I mean, she's still in her 30s, I think. But the way they tried to, you know, old age makeup,
that didn't help, because I was like, I don't really need to see Midge Maisel hobbling around her mansion when she's 90 years old or whatever.
That was the point.
I don't think it was necessary, though.
You have to see what it got her in the end, and it boils down to, she's crazy wealthy, as is Susie, who fictionally ends up becoming a manager of real people. And I'm sitting there going, I wonder if the real life managers or their families of those famous people felt like writing in and going, you didn't consult with us, and I believe it was my grandfather that represented Carol Channing, or whoever the hell it is. It's like, or, you know.
Yeah, I love that they insinuate along those lines, that they insinuate that Midge had an affair with Quincy Jones. Among many,
like all the
Frank Sinatra, I think, was in there too. It was,
and Paul Simon, famously, because it's like no, it's like no, it was a different short singer songwriter I had an affair with. So all that's, I mean, it's a lot of fun the way they're blending real life and history. I was always cocking my eyebrow, as I tend to do, with the Lenny Bruce stuff, because I know the Lenny Bruce story, and I'm sitting there going like, how far are they going to take this? Because we know how he ended up. We know who the main loves of his life were. We know the tragic end, and they go there, and all that stuff lines up. They must have known people are going to be sitting there going like, no, he would have been out of his mind at this point. No, they go there. And I love the idea that Midge had sent Susie in right towards the end, like 65 or so, to try and pull him back a little bit, like, I will book you, and and he's like, no, and he's just waiting for his pusher, and you're like going, oh dudes. And then when she goes out, he's like, "Is Midge here?" She's like, "No." And then she goes out, and Midge is there. She just didn't want to go in and embarrass him and all that stuff. That was good stuff.
Yeah,
And
all
the
of
actor who
the.
played Lenny Bruce, by the way.
Oh my God. Yeah.
Well, for one thing, let's just get this out of the way. The entire cast.
Yes.
The entire cast.
This is excellent.
It's just like
top to bottom.
Boom,
Yeah.
top to bottom. Absolutely. I always love a Shaloub. I wish Shaloub had been cast in Superman. I don't know who he'd play, but I love a Tony Shalhoub.
The strange journey that his character goes on throughout the show is just like, because you go through periods of like going, dude, get a grip, until oh God, I love this guy. He's just such a lovable guy. And that unexpected arc, like, his relationship with Joel's dad.
Yes.
With Moish Maisel. You can't stand him. Both
absolutely.
The Maisels are really interesting in that they're just really brash and like in their face, and they don't seem to have any sense of how much they're annoying everybody else in their lives, and they don't care.
Well, they kind of represent, you've got the Maisels and you've got the other family. Why am I blanking on their?
I was too.
Oh, this is terrible. But they do represent basically sort of almost the caricature of wealthy Upper East Side, Jewish families, one of whom came up through the garment district. So they're the rougher ones, and the other are the intelligentsia. And so that kind of snobs versus slobs thing is there. But by the end, they all love each other. It's totally great. I mean, when they had to live together was great, which was, I think, season 4.
Weissman.
Weissman. Sorry. Yes, there you go. But it was very, very well done. And of course, you have Kevin Pollak as Moish, and it's just that scene when Helga, the maid, gets married, and they are having the very simple ceremony that's really just attended by the Weissmans, and why not? The Maisels is there too, because the kids in common. But the whole thing about he's like, wait, does that mean you're quitting, like breaking the wedding to say that? And then having Moish look up and go, stop it, Abe. You're gonna make them think that all Jews are loud and obnoxious. That's that line. And of course, there's a very broadness to the series where even when they're getting very dramatic or moving and so forth, it's existing in a fairy tale New York, and there's a layer, a veneer of just cartoon. So I thought they kept that tone very well through the whole series, because it is not real. It's kind of this glammed up version of something like the actual story of Joan Rivers. In a way, it's kind of exactly that, because of the struggling female comedian who's not being paid attention to because she's a woman comic. And, finally, like, Joan Rivers finally broke through on like the Tonight Show, because like Johnny Carson's like, why is she struggling along in these lousy clubs and writing for other people? Because she did that too. And then finally she comes out and wows the public. So all that worked, but it's the fairy tale version. From episode 1, I was just sitting there going like, I couldn't believe it was the woman from House of Cards. I was just like, I love you. Who are you? And then I was like, oh, that's the.
Yeah. And that's kind of the thing that really highlights what a great actor she is that this is a performance. It's not like everything she does is Lois Lane-esque. This was just the delivery that was appropriate for this character. It happens to be very close to what Lois Lane is probably going to be. We'll see. I don't know.
And just the dialogue that the Palladinos create, like on Gilmore Girls, it's wordy.
Right.
It's throwback, screwball 30s 40s banter.
Mm-hmm.
And working on a live reproduction of 1940s radio like I do, it's also something I look at as that kind of speed of delivery is important, but also you have to kind of stack and layer the jokes. So in other words, there was a scene where Joel and his business partner are in that church that they're going to turn into the Catholic church are going to turn into a nightclub. And Joel's like, and his partner's like going, I went here, and, blah, 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 and he's like going, I was whipped, and so or it's like they spanked me inside that, and blah, 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 blah. And it's like, so he's not listening to him. He's doing his own jokes. Joel is doing his own jokes over here, but they're stacked to where you're like both listening to what Joel is saying and laughing, and looking at the other guy who's not even listening and saying his own thing. And I'm like going, I love that structure. It's
Yeah.
not realistic. It's not real
No.
world. But it
No.
just shows how smart all the writing is.
And it was really interesting that sometimes they would lean into the more, that you're saying, the sort of more stylized
Yes.
way of telling the story. They would go really hard in that direction, like to the extent that it kind of threw me off, like at the very beginning of the second season, where they're off in Paris for the first couple of episodes. And I'm like, it's totally, all of a sudden it's like you're in a musical without songs.
I know.
Like
I know.
Bam, 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 and very, very fast and very, very silly. And then I was like, oh wow, is this what it's gonna be like from now on? I was like kind of disoriented. And then the very next episode, they pulled the reins back again, and they got back into their initial style. I was like, okay.
It just shows that Amy Sherman Palladino and her partner, who does a lot of the writing, and blah blah Palladino. Boy, that's good.
We call her BB.
Should have done some research before I started. Yeah. But essentially, they're clearly fans of that stuff. They are bringing back a particular type of delivery and structure and so forth. But they're also just very good showrunners, as in, I mean, they've got a writer's room, but it's also, they've mapped all this out, and they're confident enough to say, look, we can go for something really broad and then have something heartbreaking, immediately following. One of the only things that disappointed me in season 5 was the short shrift they gave to May, who was he was going to marry May. And she, of course, the actress, Stephanie Sue.
She was in everything
all together, all at once. Amazing. Everything all together, all at once. Everything everywhere and all together now. All together now. No, she's great, and I really enjoyed her on that show. She was a natural fit, and then I thought it felt truncated. Like they were like,
well, it was,
we have to move on. And so it's like, nope, I'm not pregnant anymore. And I got the doctor job and I'm leaving you. Oh, boy.
That was one of the unfortunate casualties of what happened with season 5, which was not their fault, to be clear. Amazon did tell them right before they started filming. That was my theory. It turns out to be true. I just wish
bet it was a crazy expensive show because, good Lord, the cinematography and the costumes and the blah, blah, blah.
There's so many interesting storylines. And the main one, which was set up at the end of season 4, which was Joel's, his run-in with the mob and how he was going to solve this problem by going after the mob. And it seems like, I have a feeling that was supposed to go the entirety of the initial idea for season 5, and they wrap it up in like 2 30-second scenes. And like, that was a bit disappointing. I love what happened, but it should have taken, obviously, I know it wouldn't have, if had they been able to do what they wanted to do, it probably would have taken the whole season before he arrived at that agreement. Because they're like, okay, cool. Because that's like, sure, that sounds fine.
Because they're jumping through time and they're trying to consolidate. I've brought this up before. They did a little bit of a Back to the Future 2 and 3 thing where suddenly in season 5, I mean, Joel has always been protective of Midge because obviously mother of his children, he still loves her too. But they sort of had to ramp it up to where he's like almost obsessed Ahab like, because the second in season 5, he's like going, wait a minute, Susie, you're in with those guys? They're mobsters? And then like 5 minutes later, he's like going, you hands off of Midge. You can't do anything. I will sell you. You just as long as and plus they made the mob guys who had turned into lovable side characters, even though they are violent mobsters. They had to pull them back into the role of like, Susie, no, we own you for the rest of time, and we will do terrible things to you. And so it was like the whiplash of like, oh, we're not friends. And you're like, oh, okay. So like you said, it's like the progression, which probably would have been over season 5 and 6. Mm-hmm. I think they could have done one more season, or they would have stretched the exact same storyline, but they probably would have stretched it on to season 6. They just had to shorten it and go boom, boom. Like you said, it's like a couple of scenes, done. And eventually we find out through a narration about how he took the fall, when they found out about the cooked books and stuff like that, and didn't implicate anybody and did his time. And Midge kept going to visit him in jail, and he's like, why do you come? It's like, you're famous, and da da da. And she's like, well, you're here and I love you, and da da da. Yeah, all of that was all the stuff that happens, pretty much all the wrap up, I had no problem with, except for I sat there going, literally. And of course, the mob thing ends up being the main schism between Susie and Midge. But
Yes.
Alex Borstein, Jesus,
Yeah.
give
She's
her all the
fantastic.
awards. It's just give her all the awards right now. It almost makes up for some of the stuff she did on Mad TV. Anyway.
Oh, I know she looked familiar. I couldn't place where I'd seen her before.
I thought it was good that like Will Sasso ended up as one of the guys at Susie's roast, and he was also from the Mad TV days.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's a little bit of that. Not that he's not talented, but I was like, oh, I bet that was kind of like, hey, get my buddy Will in to do one of those characters.
And I will say that roast setting was a pretty brilliant way for them to kind of tie in all these different story threads. I'm pretty sure they probably came up with that because of the under the gun situation they were in,
where they all sit around and they're telling Susie stories and Midge stories.
Yeah,
that was pretty smart. It's very sort of Rashomon kind of thing too, where they're just sitting there going, I heard that it was blah 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 blah. I heard it was because of this. I was like, yeah. Also, it reminds me of that because I'm such a nerd. That very famous Batman story from the 70s, which was just a group of kids at a camp, like a boys' camp, and they're at the campfire, and Bruce Wayne is their camp master, or the guy who's taking them out. They're like underprivileged kids or something, and they're like going, no, I heard that the Batman is da da da, and each scene is like through their perception what Batman must be like. Like, I don't think he's human at all. And you see like this monstrous human bat thing. And another guy goes, no, man, he's a cool soul brother. And he's got like a rocket pack and stuff. And they show like this black Batman with a rocket pack. And meanwhile, Bruce Wayne's just sort of smirking through the whole thing. And they're like, what do you think, Mr. Wayne? And he's like going, oh, I don't think he's real at all. Or whatever it is, wraps up and the. But I love that kind of thing where it was all of them going like, no, I heard. Blah, 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 blah.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, great device.
Yeah.
Great device.
Yeah.
And it was very moving.
And
I do regret, got me in the feels plenty of time.
Oh God, yeah. And I do regret that. There a lot. I mean, there's a lot more I would have preferred to see more. I'm glad. I mean, let me just make it clear. I'm glad that I got the end of the story.
Yes.
This is just the only way we could have gotten it. That's fine. I really loved, and I know that there probably would have been a whole 2 seasons or something probably of her time on the writing staff on the Gordon Ford show. They do spend do spend a good amount of time on that in the season too. I think they spend most of their time on that, which was probably because that was supposed to be the season.
Yeah, and it's also, of course, building towards, like, they had to establish all that stuff because they're building toward. The only thing was the Gordon Ford wanting to get with her thing. I mean, not saying that was shoehorned in. I mean, come on. But it was all a little soap opera-y, but it was all just about establishing, no, there's a ceiling for you. You're our lady writer. That's all you'll ever be. You can't be on the show. But it's all building towards what I'm sure they had in their mind, which is Midge is going to take over the show at some point and will kill. And that on national television, on the biggest TV show, is what starts her rise to,
And they did that very well. I thought that scene was great.
Well. Plus the material they wrote for her. Every time that we see Midge's act, I'm like going, that's really well done, because it's not just good jokes. They're good jokes in the period and in the character of Midge Maisel. These are the kind of jokes she would tell.
Yeah. I wish that we could have gotten more of that, the writing team, that environment, because it's like all of a sudden it's like Mad Men, but in a writing room instead of an advertising company.
Well, yeah. And also the Kids in the Hall, basically, as in the not the Kids in the Hall comedy group, but the original Kids in the Hall for Sid Caesar. All the great writers who they talk about. They're actually, at the very beginning when we walked in, they were talking about Mel Brooks, and they talk about Neil. So they're talking about Neil Simon. They're talking about the classic writers room over there, but they're like, going like, oh, by the way, I heard that 2,000-year-old man thing. And I was like, it's great. It's like, tell you the truth, I don't think Mel needs Carl Reiner. They're going, Oh
I
yeah,
love that. Yeah, that
yeah.
nerdy
Where it's like they
conversation they
could
have.
have just had like 2-second gaps where
Yeah.
Carl Reiner would have said something, and then would just been Mel waiting, and then to do his next little bit. And so all that stuff, you're right. I love that atmosphere. It's awesome. And my favorite year, also the movie, is very much set in that world too. What a great movie. God, that's so good. Fictionalized Sid Caesar show.
The way that the writers were portrayed is they're all just decent dudes, you know,
Yeah.
who are passionate about what they're doing, like she is, you know, and it's
And they're a little snotty to her, and then of course they're all a team.
yeah, they haze her a little bit, but they're not, you know, they're not
No, they're not
backstabbing
assholes.
assholes. Yeah. So, and I love that part of it too.
But that's the thing about how good they were. Every side character, every I mean, the whole thing with her brother and his shiksa wife, who became the most ardent Jewish Judaism convert. I mean, even that. I mean, that's totally off to the side. Love those people. I could spend, episodes with any of the side characters and love it. Rose is great. All the stuff with Rose is always great. And of course, Abe, as far as Shalhoub, all day, all day with Abe, all day with Abe.
Yeah.
Every time they went to the Village Voice, same thing.
Yes.
Great character actors filling that room, and him thrown into it as the theater critic. It's just so good.
And that was what I was referring to earlier. That the wonderfully unexpected scene when he thinks that Moish is going to die, and he's written this obituary for him, and he was trying to get somebody else to write it, but he said, "Well, damn it, I got to write it myself." And then he winds up basically reciting it to him, or paraphrasing it to him in the hospital room, and they have this moment together that I don't think either of them saw coming, and it's just like, wow, that's so great.
It's great, and also the very sweet, like, we're getting a divorce, like the Maisels are getting divorced after 40 years, and they don't see it as any big deal. And of course they're like, wait, what? And Joel's like, what are you talking about? We're gonna still live together, we're gonna be in the same house, but we're getting divorced, it's just not working anymore, and da da da. But by the end of season 5, you realize it never happened. That they have the accident in the shower where
Yeah,
they're trapped in the shower, and they just
Yeah.
like, we had a great talk.
Yeah.
And you're like going, they do love each other. Man,
That-
it's just awesome. So
that probably
sweet.
would have been a whole episode if they had been able to do,
I'm sure you guys are going, why aren't they talking about the misadventures of Sheriff Lobo or something? or why aren't they talking about the latest rumors about, I heard some Marvel rumors.
Hold that thought. We'll
No, yeah, but there was a bunch of stuff. But the reason is that, yes, we are excited about seeing Rachel Brosnahan as Lois Lane, but also, just like when we did an episode about Charles Nelson Riley, it's just, or Sid Marty Croft or something, it's like Marvelous Mrs. Maisel is still on brand for us because, hey, quality television.
Yeah.
And great. And of course, this is a hot take. What? That show that won all those Emmys was great? Yes, it was.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna miss it coming back. But the fact that I'll see her in modern day clothes, being whisked up into the sky by a dude wearing red trunks.
Yeah.
Red Trunk Nation, where are you?
In your face.
In your face.
Not literally, because that'd be weird.
Man, we still get some contentious things. I was reading some of the more recent comments. People are still like going,
people are so
Snyder's dude is the best. Henry Cavill didn't need shorts. They're feminizing Superman. I'm like, what?
Yeah. It cracks me. Okay, well, we'll get to this.
No, sorry. Talk about tangents. Anyway,
there are two things about that surprised me. There are two characters actually that surprised me from the first couple episodes I watched of the show. I was not expecting to see much more of these two guys, but they wound up playing a huge role the rest of the whole show, not just that season. Joel Maisel,
yep,
and Lenny Bruce.
Yeah,
I thought Lenny Bruce. Oh, well, that's cool. I thought that he was just going to be like a cameo in the first episode.
Yes,
that
like
scene.
She bumps up against him. Obviously.
Yeah, that scene where she's getting out of prison the first time, and he's there, and she goes, "What? Is comedy? Is that a good career?" And he's like, "No, it's terrible. Nobody should ever do it." He said, "But you love it, right?" And he's like, And he walks out. I thought that's the last we'll ever see of Lenny in this show, because. Right? I mean, why would he be there? But not only do they bring him back, but he actually becomes one of the major supporting characters in the show, and they do things with him that I never would have thought they would have done with an actual historical figure. And it's like this wonderful sort of fictionalized portrayal, but very loving portrayal of him. And also, like
Yes.
you're saying, very true to form, true to history. He's actually doing real
They
routines
do
he
the
did in real
entire
life.
segment that he
Yeah.
did on the Steve Allen show. I
Yeah.
mean,
Yeah.
and it is word for word. And I thought, is this indulgent? And then I'm like, no, because what it does is underscore, it was, again, a smart choice. He is kind of her shadow. He is kind of not on a similar track, but he is a way where comedy can destroy you. And especially if you're already self-destructive. He's a cautionary tale, and he is in real life too. But they wanted obviously to show he was more than the one-trick pony of all the naughtiness, and I'm just going to break barriers and stuff, because the challenge of that appearance is they're like going, can you do clean stuff for an entire segment? And he's like, yeah. And he goes out, and it's one of the most famous. He kills.
Mhm.
And the actor, again, obviously had to just spend so much time, because that I listened to the audio of this original Steve Allen
Yeah,
show
me too.
bit,
Yeah.
and it is word for word, and
Yeah.
he's got the rhythms, and it's just like, dude, you nailed it so hard.
They blocked that whole thing so well.
So I love the fact that he continues to drop in as this. I like I said, I was a little like iffy about how important he became, as in them having a one night stand
Sure.
kind of thing. I'm like,
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
but yes, agreed. I didn't think Joel would be, cast aside. I had a feeling, because the families were too important. I knew he would probably be showing back up.
Well, the way his character is initially introduced, he's just a whiny little bitch,
Yeah,
essentially.
yeah,
Like, well,
yeah,
fuck that guy, and I thought
yeah,
that's setting up what happens. Okay, the trauma of the sudden split that they have, sort of drives her to go out and do this thing, which launches her career, essentially. And I thought that, well, that's the role of this character. Usually, if it was a
yeah.
movie, you wouldn't see him again, really. Maybe a couple
Yes,
more
if this were a
scenes.
2-hour movie, he would only have been the inciting thing,
Exactly. That's what I
and
thought he was going to be.
maybe you would have cut to him at the very end in the audience
Like,
watching
kind of
her on
like, okay,
stage.
yeah.
Like, all right, you were right. You're amazing.
But not only does he come back, they develop his character and they keep developing, and you love him. You wind up
Yeah.
loving the guy. It's like, this guy's great. He's such a great
Well,
guy.
and again, it is a thing where, and because we're schmaltzy too, I'm fully admitting that, the fact that we love heroic fiction along the lines of a Superman, there's an idealism that runs deep within my cynical soul.
Oh, yes.
So seeing a character, even if they never, like formed we're going to be married for the rest of time, that love bond is so well built and always there that they hate each other a lot, but at the same time they love each other. So yes, you can totally buy the fact he would go up against the mob to
That's,
protect her.
yeah.
And that whole thing when she's on the Alan Ford show. Not Alan Ford. Gordon Ford. When he's in the audience and she does the amazing set, and he's just as giddy as anybody, and he's turning around going, I'm the ex-husband. I'm she's
Yeah.
just done a set where she slams him. And of course, the terrible choice he made with the secretary, which was very funny.
Mhm.
But yeah, he's proud of it. He's like going, yeah, I'm the Mr. Maisel. I'm a Rex. So it is touching, and there's scenes of them as older them. It's good.
Yeah.
I man,
And it is one, I know the show is very over the top and not realistic in a lot of ways, but that relationship that they have,
yeah.
I mean, I bought the whole show, obviously,
Hmm.
but that did seem incredibly plausible to me. The relationship they have.
Yes, it's satisfied on character arcs much more successfully, I think, than Gilmore Girls, because
Good.
Gilmore Girls just kept going, and they had to keep generating soap opera plots, and a lot of people are going, she's with what, why? And it's just because of show. But this, maybe doing 5 seasons was ideal, because they were forced to kind of go, no, here's the arc, and this is what will happen, and DDD, and it all satisfied. It
Yeah.
is unrealistic, but what they're so good at, and it's the same with all of their series, is the emotional content is solid. The world can be fantastical, but the emotional attachments and the relatability never goes away. There are times I'm sitting there going like, oh, with Abe, there are times I'm sitting there going like, well, this is for comedy. I'm like going, the man is too smart to have done this.
Yes.
This is
Yeah.
dumb.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm going like, but is it in this world? I sit there going, no, Abe needed to do exactly that. He needed to say exactly that because that's funny and I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
So that kind of writing, I'm praising that. I really zero in on that. And I did. Oh, speaking of Gilmore Girls, the grandma, Kelly Bishop, ends up in the prison. That was so great. She had this one cameo where Susie goes and she's the one who was one of the. She goes, yeah, it was about the setting the fire on the Rose's tea house, and so she was one of the matchmakers. But she's done like a gangster. That's the whole thing. She's like going, she's like going, all right, maybe that was us. Okay. Rose can, because this person's out, Rose can have that part of the city. And I'm just like going, because she was such an upper crust, snooty broad in Gilmore Girls. It was funny. They're like going, do you want to play kind of this rough? He's like, sure. So it was good to see her. I mean, their cameos, anytime they brought people in, I'm just like going, oh, great. And I liked, even though Zach Levi has become a problematic, controversial, dumb person on the interwebs. I've always liked him. So his arc is the doctor character. I mean, it's like every person they brought in, I'm like,
yeah,
they are great at casting. Plus, it's a show that probably attracted everybody.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sure, especially about Jane Lynch. Every time Jane Lynch shows up as oh, what's her name? The big popular comic, Sophie.
Oh, yeah. Sophie Lennon.
Sophie Lennon.
Yeah.
Jane Lynch ate that up. She just chewed it up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, for one thing, she's always good. She's good in everything. But I was just sitting there going like, what a treat. Thank you. Oh,
yeah.
By the way, speaking of this, if you're kind of, it's not obviously the same kind of world, but that made me think of Gene Smart and Hacks. Hacks is amazing on HBO. So highly recommend.
Another show I don't know. Yeah.
That's another Brendan recommends if you haven't watched Hacks. I mean, it's 3 seasons in, so a lot of people out there are going like, yeah, we're going to recommend next. Toast? Yeah, Toast is good. I like it. You know, you just find out about Toast? No, I've been watching Hacks for a while, but it's good.
About to ask you what Toast was.
Yeah, I've heard. That's what I'm here for. It's bread. It's not quite burnt. It's almost burnt.
So is that Apple TV show? Toast?
Yeah. Yeah. Toast of London, actually. Also great. Matt Berry.
Oh, yeah. But you mentioned Zach's Levi's character. That it just occurred to me that one of the brilliant things they did is, I forget what season it is, when they're at the summer camp.
Summer camp, yeah.
And that's when their romance blossoms. And then she gets that gig with Shy Baldwin. Yeah. And so she goes off of that, and we don't see, all of a sudden his character's not even mentioned for like the entirety of that whole next season. And is it the season after that? Like all of a sudden he shows up and we're just as shocked as Midge is. He shows up at the deli that one night, or the diner, whatever it is. And that was so well done, because you're thinking, if you may have been thinking, oh, what happened to that guy? But then you just, oh, well, whatever.
You just don't expect.
Then all of a sudden there he is, just like in real life. She's like, oh, yeah, oops, sorry.
It's very jarring if you run into an ex, because it's almost always by chance. And then you're like, oh, what do we say? What do we say right now? And I think the whole reason he disappeared was he said the magic word. He was off making Shazam, I think.
Oh,
which is why he disappeared.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that is great. I think it also just shows that they never really ignored a plot thread. Mm-hmm. They never really let anything totally drop. There are some jarring things, especially in season 5, when you have flash forwards and you get these teases of like, so the daughter ends up being this hyper genius, but we only get like a
2 scenes
taste of that. And we actually get a lot more of the son who's on the kibbutz and marries the, like the hardcore traditionalist. And you're like going, well, that's interesting. Get back to the hyper genius daughter who, like they've already shown the daughters in this family pretty much hate and love their mothers.
Yeah.
So they set that up pretty well. But I'm like, I still kind of want to know more about what happened there.
And clearly, again, that was, I'm sure, something we would have gotten a whole lot more of if they'd been able to do however many seasons they were planning to do. So,
but everybody ends at the, and it's just them watching Jeopardy together. It's cute. I was afraid, actually. I'm like going, please don't have one of them croak during this. It's like, and they didn't. It just ends on them laughing. I was like, okay, all right, I love it. Oh, Susan Myers. And that roast episode was just bingo bongo great. What again, like great device, but also well cast, everyone in there. The idea that Mike, the asshole assistant producer, becomes a producer. It's like the way they built up his and Susie's friendship from absolutely hating each other to then like being like pals. It's just great.
The thing about season 5, and I will warn anybody who hasn't seen it yet, because we basically spoiled the whole thing.
I just told you how the entire show ends.
You literally can't take your eyes away from the screen for a second, because they jump around in time so much. If you miss like 5 minutes of one episode and you go to the next one, you're like, oh wait, what?
I actually saw online someone posted a timeline. Like
really?
If you wanted to, because they do bounce around. And there are moments, especially when they're doing anything in the 70s, where you're like going, wait, is this before or after that? Like when she's about to marry Philip Roth, apparently, and she decides that to call it off, and Susie has to go, you're just not funny enough for it. And he's like going, and she goes, yes, Portnoy's Complaint's a very funny book, but you don't talk, maybe if you had been writing it at the breakfast table. So Philip Roth off screen, she's about to marry him and all that stuff with like, and we got Grand Funk Railroad. She goes, the hard rock band? She goes, no, I told you I like funk music. She goes, well, they put funk in their name.
And you see her on the phone later with their manager or something. So maybe don't put think about the name next time. It's not my problem. It's your fault.
So good.
Anyway. It reminds me, one of the earliest things that stuck with me, I still remember one of my favorite moments. It's an understated scene, but it's just so indicative of the great patter between the characters of Midge and Susie when they're when Susie in the early stages of their working relationship, and Susie doesn't have her own phone, so she's at the newsstand using her newsstand friend's phone.
Yeah,
and Midge calls her. And she calls her Susan, which Susie gets pissed off. Like, it's not Susan, it's Susie. It's like, what? Oh, I thought it was Susan. No, it's not Susan. You look like a Susan. I do. Well, maybe you look more like this. And then finally, Susie goes, okay, so how do you think this conversation's going? To get them back on. It's so great.
It is. And then of course that gets threaded through, because in season 5, we meet her former her college girlfriend, who has married Gordon Ford. And actually all that stuff was really moving too. When they finally when Midge and Susie have that talk, and she's like going, wait a minute, were you guys actually like in love? And she's like going, yeah, maybe, and it's just like, wow, I never got over it. And she's, well, you'll fall in love again. She goes, no, why would I? It's just destroy me again. You're like, oh, human stuff. Very good. But the whole idea is that, what was her name? Heidi or Hetty. It was Hetty. Every time she brings her up, she's like going, oh, Susan represents you. And she goes, I'm sorry? And she goes, Susan.
Susie I missed that. I missed that too.
Yeah. Is that she's still referring to her as Susan. It's just so good.
Yeah.
Damn show. All right. So I know that physical media is dead, but Marvelous Mrs. Maisel I would buy a box set. Because there's not really, there are episodes I thought were slight or whatever, or irritating, but generally speaking, 5 seasons of a solid, beautiful show. And plus, we've both lived in New York. You longer than me, but I'd have to say it's probably the most accurate representation.
It really is. Yeah.
I'm saying that both kind of serious and kind of not.
Yeah, not in the way people are talking to each other, really, but it does. It really, and I mentioned this.
They use a lot of real locations, which that's something.
They really do go to great lengths to immerse you, and you really feel like you're in New York.
Every diner that they go to or deli, I sit there going like, oh, It's like I can actually smell that place.
Yeah, it's in the
like in
way
my mind. I'm like, yeah, I used to go to places like that.
it's in the locations they use, it's in the set dressings they use, it's in the dialogue, and they throw in, like you say, they throw in references to things that really happened, or real people who did real things.
That's for the nerds when they're like going, oh, the new show just opened Camelot. I'm like going, oh, Camelot just opened. I mean, it's sort of the history buff. I'm like going, oh, cool. Oh, they're talking about, oh, neat.
But it really is, in a sense, a show obviously written by showbiz veterans. Yes. It gives you, as hyper real as it is often, it really is a great portrayal of what it means to commit yourself to that life, because you have to be completely dedicated against all odds. And that's Midge and Susie embody that to the hilt.
I will say this about, I can't speak for my brother. I'm working on the impression, but I will say this. That's something that I think my brother came to terms with. And I, as an outsider, also saw when we both lived in LA, my brother was trying to be a stand-up comic. I mean, he was a stand-up comic. Didn't mean to diminish, because he ran a comedy room for years there. He hosted, he booked, and he performed. But I think there's a thing, and I saw it amongst all of their compatriots. And it is like any other art form. The thing is, if it isn't something you have to do, back out. And my brother loves it. My brother is a very showbiz guy, great performer, really great MC, host, very quick off the cuff. But it is a thing of driving to get in every open mic, get 5 minutes here, and then drive over there, The dedication and the obsession you need, it can't be generated. It has to be real, just organically grown out of you. Mm-hmm. And all the people that we knew in LA who have since gone on to become really famous, they all had that.
Yeah.
And it was their life. Mm-hmm. And that's the reason I stopped drawing. I mean, doing art. I went to art school in New York because I was going to be, I thought, a comic book artist. But even in art school, I felt like an imposter, because I didn't have, and I could feel that I didn't have the exact same, I can't stop, that kind of drive. And I realized that writing for me was that. Like, I have screenplays on screenplays that will never be produced, maybe even never even read. I can't stop writing.
You can't stop.
I love it.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is that it makes me feel like me. So that is something, obviously, any creative would respond to watching Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And that's why you feel that triumph for her when it finally happens. You're like, she's done some things that weren't too cool to get there, but nothing horrible. But you've basically seen someone up against huge odds make it. And that's always like,
but again, she fails again and again and again and again. And that is real life, people.
Yeah.
And I love that they set that up from the beginning. Like, you see, Joel is the example of somebody who didn't have, he
didn't have the natural.
He gets one disappointment. He's like, I'm out. Not only am I out, but I'm getting divorced. My whole life is fuck everything. That's the extreme end of that.
And of course, in the first episode, the whole thing is her finding out that he cribbed jokes. He stole jokes.
Right.
And that to her is so offensive.
Yes.
Joel is a naturally funny person, but he doesn't have what it takes to be like the pro, and was actually stealing jokes. And she is just like offended to the soul.
Yeah. Because
she was supporting him. She was like, yeah, you're so funny. That thing you did is amazing. Yeah. And then someone goes, oh yeah, he got that from blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And she's like, oh my God, she loses all faith in him. Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. Again, they do it so well. She had this thing in her. She didn't know it was there, and she discovers it, and that's the whole story.
I can definitely see her writing something along the lines of "I Spent a Night with Superman," or I think I'm gonna make a T-shirt out of Caped Wonder Stunned City. I went looking. I was like, did someone make a T-shirt out of the? It wasn't the Daily Planet. That was the rival paper, but that was the first headline of.
Who was the rival paper?
Maybe it was Daily Planet. Okay, Daily Planet's was Caped Wonder Stunned City.
Okay.
Perry lists off a bunch of. He goes,
"What's it?
The Post, blah 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 blah. Look, Ma, no wires, all this stuff." And he's like,
I
Cape
think you're
Wonder
right.
City is
I think
Daily
it.
Planet.
It really. Keep
And
wondering.
then the follow-up is the article that Lois gets, which is I Spent the Night with Superman.
Yeah,
She gets the exclusive interview. Oh,
it
I'm
is. You're
telling
right.
you.
It was the Daily Planet. Okay.
Yeah, I can't wait for Superman, dude.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so yeah, now that we're done, so now we're done talking about
Yeah,
Mrs.
we're
Mason.
done talking about Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
I
I'm sure they appreciate us bumping their numbers at this late date.
I
Oh,
am
never heard
going
of
back
that
to the
show. I'll check it out.
getting back to the Trunks thing. The snide attitude that the
The
Snyder
Schneider attitude.
that was a totally unintentional pun there. The attitude they have, like, yeah, you guys and your granny panties, you just, why don't you get over? It's like, dude, we won. We already know we're getting the Trunks.
What
Go
what
away.
amazes me? Okay, we are on the part of the spectrum that is anticipating in a positive way. Like we're pumped. We could still be horribly disappointed. Hell, man, I was pumped for Man of Steel. But what surprises me are the people on the other end. And John and I have talked about this a lot. We've talked about it. There are people that can't wait for it to fail, that are
I
already
know.
saying it bombed. And that's a lot of the people that we're seeing in the comments saying that,
Yeah.
oh, Warner Brothers is screwed up. And it's like, well, you just toss money down the hole. Gunn can't do it. It's going to be awful. You're like, do you know something I don't? It's like all the stuff I'm seeing so far is encouraging, or even if it's not encouraging, there are things like, well, that's interesting. I don't know what he's going to do,
Yeah.
but I can't wait to see it. All of these things that we hear about it get us pumped about the possibilities, what could be a great Superman movie. And that's all I want. But it is that the people that are clinging to, almost as if in order for us to feel justified, they have to fail. For us to feel good about our beliefs in Man of Steel and the Snyderverse, whatever else might happen has to be the worst thing ever.
Yeah.
They won't open that to the possibility that they will enjoy a James Gunn Superman that isn't Henry Cavill in a blue onesie. And I do understand fervent fanboyism.
Sure.
But there's a toxic nature to the negative side of it. If I don't like something, I'll say it. I'll state my opinion, but I'm not going to harp on it, and I'm not going to say you who liked it are wrong. Well, maybe in passing it as a joke, but at the same time, it's not something that becomes a mission for me. It's like, hey, if I don't like this take on a character, I just won't watch it. I like.
Well, most of all, you're not going to be going around to other YouTube videos that made by people who like what you don't like and say, why you guys like this thing that I hate? You guys are out of your minds. Like,
yeah. Instead, why don't you find YouTube videos that are about things that you like that also like it? So then you can go, man, isn't that great? Instead of going like, you're wrong, you're idiots. You didn't get the complexities of the next snap.
Yeah, there's plenty of pro Snyder people out there. Maybe they're not pro enough for you. I don't know.
I give Snyder his due. There are things that I will like and go,
sure,
that guy can do a visual thing. Like, that thing is awesome. Look at that scene. But it's just sort of like, no, for me, and I will say, for me, it's subjective. It was the wrong way to go with that character. Almost all the way down the line.
There's a really, along these lines, there's a really good video that Ryan Arey on Screen Crush just put out. Do you ever watch that channel?
No.
He's on our side. He has the same things we do about Superman, but he does a really great analysis of comparing the similarities between and the differences between Christopher Reeve's Superman the movie and Man of Steel, and how I didn't even realize how many of the same beats the story has. It's just that Snyder's is kind of told in a non-linear fashion.
Yes,
it's part of the reason. But says, look, this is why it doesn't work, and this is why this thing offends me, and And he's like me, that the moment that where the movie really lost him was when Jonathan says, "No, don't save me from the tornado." It's like that guy's that the scene is just
everything
dumb.
that Pa Kent says in Man of Steel is it feels reactionary. As I've said before, it felt like an attempt by the writers and possibly with Snyder's direction, perhaps, to say this ain't your daddy's Superman, because we've really real world thought this out in the modern world. There's no way this guy would be like, you were sent here to help people and hide your light under a bushel. We're going to go farther with hide your light under a bushel. It's going to be, don't use your powers because everyone's going to come for you. They're going to dissect you and pull you apart. that could be a concern voiced by someone, but that's not a Pa Kent thing.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
just not.
Yeah.
It offends the core.
Yeah.
And yes, there's no way a heroic Pa Kent character would say, "Don't save me. Don't save the kids in the bus."
When there's no way that Clark would have said, "Okay, I won't save you." It's like, screw this. There's like 7 people under a bridge. Nobody's going to believe them anyway, even if they do see it.
I mean, not that that's like, oh, I never thought. Of course, we thought about it. It is the ongoing thing, but pinpointing that is the moment where it feels wrong, and it's like the movie's got to do a lot to bring me back, and it never does. And then it doubles down on stuff by having the disaster porn of Metropolis and hundreds of thousands of people dying, and then the next snap. It's just like, dude, no.
Well,
wrong.
He does point out something that I was never really, I never really felt was articulated very well by the movie itself. But now I get it. It's like, it's my bad that I didn't catch this. I still don't like the movie, and he doesn't like the movie either. But he compares the sort of the thesis that he's presenting in this video is that the two movies, Superman, the movie, Christopher Reeves, Richard Donner's film, is sort of about embracing your destiny.
Yeah.
And accepting things that you can't change, and also sort of changing things anyway, because, screw the rules. I'm going to change things anyway at the end.
Yeah. Superman does a rebellious act at the end.
Yeah. Well, conversely, Man of Steel is about, it's like a treatise on free will, essentially. It's almost like an Ayn Rand kind of free will type of thing,
Yeah.
And because it's like, okay, I have these powers, but do I really want to use them? Do I have to use them? That's kind of what he was going for. I don't think he succeeded, but also it's a very awkward idea.
The idea of superpowers as burden has been explored very well through some very famous characters. What I don't think you should do ever is say, that's a great concept, and graft it onto a character that isn't built for that. In other words, Spider-Man is the classic Job of comics. His powers have helped so many, but personally, his life is pretty wrecked by ever being bitten by that spider. All the way down the line, it is responsibility. And sometimes he's like, I can't keep doing this. I have to have a life of happiness. I want to end up with MJ and blah, blah, blah. So Spider-Man no more, or all that stuff.
Yeah.
That's built into his character, and we love it because that is a great aspect of superheroics that could be examined. Superman's just not that. Superman is a friend, and that's the whole thing. He doesn't see it as a burden. It gives him purpose. He loves having a purpose. There's a series coming up, by the way, that DC's putting out, and I can't remember what it's called. This is coming up, but it's all about all the superheroes, and this is, non-canonical, but all the superheroes in the DC universe lose their powers, and it's about them continuing to try to help people. So Superman, just a guy. And actually, probably Batman would be the best of them because he never had powers to begin with. But yeah, Wonder Woman, Superman, Flash, they're still trying to be heroes. They just don't have any powers. I'm looking forward to that. Could be awesome. I think Marvel did one years ago called Powerless. That was kind of the same thing. Good idea. So anyway, the thing with Superman is you can do a lot and examine a lot of takes about what it's like to be Superman, or someone who knows or falls in love with Superman or whatever. But what you don't do is you don't mess with the core. You just don't mess with the core just to say you did, just to say we're modernizing. No, it's not about that. You stay true to the character. You want the modern take? Create a new character, or find one that's been, not as popular, but embodies what you're talking about. Then make that movie.
Yeah.
I mean, because there are plenty of harsher heroes or gritty real world heroes, even in the DC universe. Go ahead and use one of those, but don't try to fit Superman in that mold, because he's always going to bounce back to the original shape, not unlike Stretch Armstrong. Another great hero who has not gotten his due. Anyway, on that note, bye.
Yes.
I think the question mark sells it.
Yeah, it does.
It has Marvel in the title. I expected her to gain some sort of radioactive powers or something, or be revealed to be a mutant, and she never did. That's why I gave up after season 4.